I heard a knock. From my closet. 3 slow, measured thumps. I held my breath. My body was petrified. The bedroom was empty. The door was closed. But something or someone was knocking from inside. And then there was a whisper. Quiet. Hoarse. Right behind the door. I know you can hear me. My stomach clenched into a tight knot. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I just stood there staring at the closet, my heart pounding in my chest. And then bang. The closet door shuttered. I ran away. I don't remember unlocking the bedroom door. I don't remember running down the hall. But I suddenly found myself in the living room, out of breath, with my hands shaking so badly that I could barely grab the phone. 911. The knocking started again. Not from the closet this time. From the front door. Quiet, rhythmic knocking. Slow. Patient. As if the person behind the door already knew that I wouldn't call for help. I forced myself to get closer, barely dragging my feet. I looked through the peephole and saw a man. He was tall. Pale. He raised his hand and waved at me. I had never seen him before. But somehow he seemed familiar. And then, without even opening my mouth, I heard his voice. You've taken over my apartment. Spots swam before my eyes. My knees went weak because suddenly I remembered. I remembered the ad. The one I'd seen 3 months ago when I moved in. Apartment 6B. It was vacant. It was a lie because the man behind the door had lived here before and he had never left. I recoiled from the door as if I had touched hot metal. My head was pounding, my hands were ice cold. It's impossible, I've been living here for 3 months. The rental agent said the apartment had been empty for years. Years? Then who is this man? I looked through the peephole again. He's still there. Standing still, only his hand is slowly lowering after that strange, creepy wave. His eyes. I couldn't see them clearly because of the distortion of the glass, but they were, looking right at me. As if he knew that I was standing there, holding my breath, trying to convince myself that this was some kind of mistake. But that wasn't the worst part. When I looked closer, his lips were moving. I couldn't hear a word. But he was talking. And he was talking to me. I swallowed hard and shivered and put my ear to the door. Silence. And then a whisper. Let me in. I recoiled. My heart was pounding in my chest so hard I could feel it in my ears. No. This can't be real. I grabbed my phone. It was real. The police. I quickly dialed 911 and pressed the call. 911, what's your emergency? I opened my mouth, but the sound stuck in my throat. I looked through the peephole again. He was gone. The street in front of the house was empty. Only the dim light of a street lamp spilled across the sidewalk. Hello? Are you still there? The dispatcher's voice sounded distant as if through water. Yes, I whispered. I think everything's fine. I disconnected the call. And almost immediately, there was another knock from the bedroom. From the closet. Louder this time. The knocking in the closet became more insistent. Now it was not 3 slow knocks, but a series of dull thuds. As if someone from inside was trying to open the door. I stood in the hallway holding my breath. The closet door was closed. It was locked with a small deadbolt that I had put there myself because I hated it when it opened accidentally. So how the hell could someone be inside? I took a step forward, feeling my heart pounding somewhere in my throat. And then, the pounding stopped. Abruptly. Like the sound in my headphones being turned off. Silence fell like a heavy blanket. I waited, staring intently at the wardrobe door, ready to see it open. But it didn't move. I swallowed slightly. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe it was just noise in the pipes? Or the old wood creaking from the temperature change. Yes, that had to be the logical explanation. I slowly reached for the latch and heard breathing. From within the wardrobe. My finger froze an inch from the metal hook. I could clearly hear someone breathing inside. Slowly. And labored. Like a person standing right next to me in the dark, waiting. Waiting for me to open the door. I backed away, barely moving my legs, trying not to give myself away. Yevhen Ryzhevsky, January 4th, 2025, 22:38. The breathing in the closet remained steady. I couldn't stand it. I rushed to the entrance, slammed the door and ran outside without even thinking. The cold night air hit me in the face. I turned to the windows of my apartment on the 2nd floor and saw a shadow in the bedroom window. It stood motionless, looking at me. I opened my mouth but made no sound. And then, she was gone. As if she had never been there. I stood on the sidewalk, gasping for breath. The night air was burning my lungs, but I couldn't force myself to move. Someone was in my apartment. It wasn't a dream, it wasn't a hallucination. I could clearly see a silhouette in the window. But now it was empty. I quickly looked around. The street was almost deserted. Only a few parked cars and dim streetlights cast long shadows on the sidewalk. What now? Go back? No. Not after all this. I pulled out my phone and opened the app to call the police. My finger hovered over the screen. My mind raced with thoughts. What am I going to say to them? Good evening, someone is breathing in my closet and then I saw a ghost in the window? They'll just laugh me off. I ran my hand over my face. I need to calm down. Find a logical explanation. Maybe the door was left unlocked and some homeless person got in? Or, no. I closed the door. I closed the closet. And someone was there. I looked at the apartment again. The light in the living room was still on. If there really was someone there, they were either hiding or running away. I walked slowly to the doorway trying to calm down. And then a vibration in my hand. A call. An unknown number. I took an involuntary breath before answering the call. Hello? Breathing. Heavy. Raspy. And then a whisper. Don't come back in. The connection was cut off. I froze. My fingers went numb, the phone almost dropped out of my hand. Who was that? How did this person know that I was standing outside the house? I slowly raised my head and my heart almost stopped. There was a silhouette on the roof of the house. It was motionless. It was looking directly at me. And even at this distance I could clearly feel its gaze. I swallowed. My neck was stiff and my hands were cold as if I were standing in the center of an ice storm. I couldn't move, my legs refused to move. There was a person on the roof of the house. I could see him clearly. Although the night was dark, the streetlights on the streets illuminated the top enough. But the silhouette did not move. It stood there as if it were part of the building itself, invisible until I looked up. I wrapped my fingers around my phone and tried to dial the police, but my hands were shaking so badly that the numbers on the screen started to shift. The sight on the roof wouldn't let go. Was it a man? I couldn't tell. It looked like he was not just standing there, but waiting. What was he waiting for? I suddenly realized that this could be the same person who kept appearing in my thoughts. The same person who left those strange messages. My hand reached for the phone again. I was going to call the police, but suddenly there was a loud knock on my door. It was as if someone was trying to break it down again. I was struck by silence. I didn't know what to do. It seemed like I was in control of the situation, trying to understand what was happening, where the line between the real and the imaginary was. But it was unbearably scary. Only now I realized that when I stood in the corridor next to my door, I was not alone. Another knock. And another. This time they answered from the other side. I closed my eyes and for a second thought that it was all just a dream. Maybe I was going crazy after a few days without sleep. Perhaps I hadn't slept and had just lost my mind recently. But when I opened my eyes again, the silhouette on the roof was closer. I could see it more clearly now. It was a man. And he wasn't just standing there. He was approaching. After a second's pause, I finally gathered myself and took one big step back. My legs didn't obey, but I realized I couldn't stand still any longer. I had to go. Before this man got even closer. But before I could take a step, there was another knock on my window. I turned around so fast I almost fell. My mind refused to accept what I was seeing. My window was closed. I remember that I didn't actually open it. But there, behind the glass, a shadow. She was looking at me. She wasn't just standing there. It was moving as if it were hovering right in front of the window. I couldn't make out the details, but it was definitely not just a glare or a reflection. It was a person. And she was there. I clenched my fists, trying to gather myself. Something in me said I had to close the window. Otherwise, this thing would take another step toward me. I started running, almost stumbling, toward the window. But just as I reached the curtains and was ready to quickly pull them back, I heard another familiar sound, a knock. It hadn't gone away. It was the window. And now I knew for sure someone was on either side. I quickly pulled the curtains open and there was the same man standing in front of me again. He was standing there very close, his hands pressing against the glass as if he wanted to break through it. I couldn't even understand why his face was so poorly visible. It seemed to be blurry, barely recognizable, like fog. But his eyes, those eyes, they were deep, almost black, and they didn't look away from me. I was trapped. In a windowless room where every movement made me even more terrified. I tried to understand what was happening, but it made no sense. It was not just tension, not just a scary situation. It was unreal. I grabbed the phone again and dialed the police, but when I started listening to the beeps on the other end, I realized that I couldn't say a word. No, I couldn't tell them what was happening. Because, honestly, I didn't understand it yet. I screamed. For the first time in all this time. But his hands did not move. His gaze was unmoving. I no longer felt safe. In fact, I was already convinced that something bad had happened in that apartment before I even moved in. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this man was not just a sinister neighbor. It was something worse. And I was just beginning to find out what really happened in that apartment. I stood there, nervously looking at the man who was still on the other side of the glass. His gaze did not change, and with each passing second, my thoughts became more and more torn. My mind was in chaos. I tried to dial the police again, but then my body refused to listen. I couldn't gather my thoughts. My brain was so confused that I couldn't even articulate what was happening. I just stood there looking at that face. Suddenly, I felt a sharp cold. The wind that suddenly made its way into the room seemed to have broken through the cracks in the window frames. Perhaps it was just a stressful experience. But when I turned to the window, I saw something incredible. The man changed his pose. Now he was standing on his other side, not moving. His face was no longer blurry, it was absolutely clear. And it was even more frightening. I could see all the features, every detail: white skin, bluish lips, black, almost inexpressive eyes that were looking at me again. But there was something unnecessary, something inhuman in his gaze. And suddenly I realized that he was not just looking. He seemed to be observing. He knew everything about me, about what was going on in my life, even if I didn't remember any of it. Now I didn't just feel scared. I could feel something dark gradually filling this space. What the hell is this thing? Why is he trying to scare me? Is it possible that he's not even human? I took another step back and looked at the door. It was locked, but the feeling that he could appear there at any moment was overwhelming. No, I can't stay. Gathering all my will, I decided not to wait any longer. I squeezed the doorknob and pushed the door open. My hand was trembling, but I hated that room, that space. I stepped out into the corridor and rushed to the stairs. However, as soon as I took the first step, I heard a voice. A small room opened up in front of me with an old wardrobe covered in dust and cobwebs. Its door, half open, seemed to invite me to reveal the secrets of the past. My mind told me to be careful, but my curiosity got the better of me. I approached, barely touching the cold wood, feeling every cell in my body tremble with a sense of danger. Behind the cabinet, I saw many antiques, dusty photographs, yellowed letters, scrolls of documents that told stories of days long gone. Each of these items seemed to hold memories of those who once inhabited this house, their joys, sorrows, and secrets. The feeling that each object wanted to tell me something made me hold my breath. A barely audible whisper came from the basement walls, as if someone was trying to tell their story through the ages. This quiet sound, which was getting louder by the second, made me feel like a participant in a big game where every step could reveal something incredible or scary. I carefully opened one cabinet door and found myself in front of a huge collection of old books, each with a heavy leather binding, and the pages silently kept the secrets of the past. On the shelves were sheets of notes, as if someone had left a message for the next seeker of truth. The floor, forced to absorb memories over the years, seemed alive. It vibrated with a distant, almost inaudible whisper that seemed to come from the walls themselves. At the same time, fear and excitement overwhelmed me. Every detail of this basement indicated that I was on the verge of solving a great mystery, but each discovery could cost me my soul. Suddenly, my eyes caught sight of an old album half hidden between other things. The cover was damaged, but on its surface I recognized the words carved in an almost indistinguishable font. She was here, and now she is waiting for you. My mind slowed down and my heart beat faster. Who is this person? Could he or she be connected to all the strange events that were happening in this house? Only one thing was clear. Every step forward revealed new secrets, and each of them left an inescapable mark on my soul. I felt the shadow of the past momentarily cover my thoughts. Now I realized that this basement was not just a storehouse of old things, but a real temple of forgotten memories, each of which could reveal the truth or plunge me even deeper into darkness. As I continued to explore the basement, I felt every detail of this old house take on a special meaning. The shadows that danced on the walls seemed to hide their own stories, and the noises seemed to be silently lamenting past tragedies. After I familiarized myself with the contents of the old chest and reread the diary entries, my mind began to work on the edge between fear and fascination. I stood in front of the carved box for a long time, thinking about how things left behind long ago could have influenced the fates of those who lived in this house. Inside me, I had a growing feeling that all this was not just an accident, but a carefully planned sign for the next person who dared to uncover the truth. My thoughts took a turn for the worse when I noticed that in the illumination of the old lamplight, the symbols on the box seemed to flicker. They resembled mysterious runes, each with its own meaning, like an instruction or warning to those who ventured further. I slowly opened the lid of the box. Inside was a small key with an ancient engraving, almost invisible against the background of the tarnished fabrics. Next to the key was a small card, sealed with a wax seal with symbols that looked like signs from another time. Tearing open the sealed envelope, I read the handwritten text, which seemed to tell me about the ancient secret of this place. Those who seek the truth must be prepared to lose everything. Come back to the place where it all began and find out why the darkness never recedes. The words of this postcard chilled me to the bone. I felt a chill penetrate my skin as if an invisible hand was touching my soul. A determination grew inside me. I had to solve this mystery despite the fear that paralyzed my thoughts. At the same time, every word from the diary, every object found here, became more important than ever as an element of the puzzle I had to solve. There were even more interesting details in the basement. For the sake of completeness, I carefully moved a heavy wooden cabinet in the corner and opened a small door leading to an even narrower corridor. Beyond it was a room where time seemed to have stopped. Everything was covered in dust, and the yellowish glare of old cameras reflected on the walls. In the center of the room, on the windowsill, was another artifact, a small clock with a broken face that ticked rhythmically as if to remind us of the inevitability of time and fate. My thoughts were spinning like a whirlwind. Every object seemed to be part of one big secret left by those who once lived here. I realized that I couldn't stop, because every minute of delay could cost me not only peace of mind but also safety. It was becoming clear that this house was a living organism which kept not only things but also the souls of its past inhabitants. They may be waiting to be heard, to have their stories finally told. I felt the key in my hands pulsating as if I were about to open the door to a new, unknown world. The feeling of responsibility was mixed with an unreasonable desire to find out the truth, even if it had to break my soul. A determination appeared on my face. I could no longer ignore what was happening. The message from the diary, the ancient key, and the mysterious postcard formed a single line leading to the answer. Breathlessly, I put everything I had gathered on a small table in the center of the room and decided to take the next step. I returned to the main corridor of the basement, where every sound reminded me of an invisible presence watching my actions. The echo of my footsteps seemed too loud in the silence of the place. And then I heard a new sound, a quiet, almost inaudible voice coming from the depths of the corridor. It was like a whisper from the past, echoing my darkest thoughts so accurately that I couldn't tell if it was my own imagination or a real presence. The voice repeated words that seemed to be carved in time. You must know the truth even if it breaks your soul. My mind was filled with doubt and fear again. But I knew I couldn't back down. Now that all the pieces of the puzzle were in place, I was on the verge of a solution that could change my life forever. Every detail, every message I found pointed to one inescapable truth that I had to discover. I took a deep breath and, holding the key and the postcard in one hand, continued to move forward, not knowing what exactly awaited me next in the depths of this forgotten basement. After I lifted the ancient chest lid, I was enveloped by the heavy smell of dusty paper and forgotten memories. Inside was a collection of antiques, a yellowed newspaper clipping, a few sepia photographs wrapped in worn paper, and a worn diary in a dark blue leather binding. Each item seemed to scream from the past, telling its own story. Я бережно газетний вірш, розгорнув його. Заголовок майже стертий часом, проголошував. Secrets of the Forgotten Apartment. My mind instantly plunged into thoughts about the connection between these things and the strange events that had engulfed my home. Could they reveal to me the truth about the unknown past of this place? Then I picked up one of the photographs. It depicted a gathering of dignitaries dressed in elaborate suits in front of an elegant party taking place in a luxurious house. The smiles on their faces hid the depth of their sadness, and their eyes seemed to reflect unbridled pain. I was particularly interested in the portrait of a man who resembled the silhouette I had seen on the roof of the house. His gaze was barely noticeable, but it contained something unusual. A deep darkness, as if he knew everything about this place. The diary looked even more interesting. Its pages were filled with handwritten entries, where every word breathed anxiety and doubt. With each page, I plunged deeper into the world of past events, which seemed to tell of secrets that should have remained buried long ago. One of the entries mentioned an unexplored room, which was referred to as the heart of the apartment, where the darkest memories were stored. The author writes about how he felt the presence of a stranger whom no one saw, but he felt it, like an invisible hand that pressed him to the ground in moments of deepest despair. My hands trembled as I read the entries that spoke of the unfortunate fate of the apartment's inhabitants. With each paragraph, I had a growing sense that these events were not accidental. All the evidence pointed to the fact that someone had deliberately left a trace to warn future residents. Thinking about it made me feel like I was becoming part of some kind of danger that could not be ignored. Teenage fear was beginning to mix with curiosity, and I felt that finding these things was the key to the puzzle. But each new detail only made me feel more and more like I was being watched. In this room full of the silent voices of the past, I felt as if I were trapped, where every step could reveal another horrible truth. I carefully examined the chest again. At the bottom, among other things, there was a small box. Its lid was decorated with carvings that resembled ancient symbols. It seemed that every curve of this symbol carried a message that should be deciphered. Just touching this box filled me with coldness, as if it was charged with some kind of power, ready to awaken memories of the dark pages of this house's history. Suddenly, from behind the basement walls, a voice barely audible muttered, as quiet as a whisper, but filled with pain and determination. I could not understand whether it was just a play of the imagination or a real warning from the past. At that moment, every detail from the dusty clothes to the soft knocking of the walls merged into a single composition that seemed to challenge my own resilience. I held the box in my hands, feeling my heart beat faster and faster. It was clear that this object could be the key to the mystery, but it also opened the door to new, even more terrifying secrets. And then, when I was about to open it, a phrase was heard in the darkness of the basement that touched me to the core. "You have to know the truth, even if it breaks your soul." I stood there, fascinated and terrified, realizing that every step in this basement was bringing me closer to an incredible revelation that would change everything. Would I be able to survive this encounter with the past? Will I find the answers to all the questions that have been tormenting me lately? Holding my breath, I walked up to the heavy door leading to the locked section of the basement and put the ancient key in the lock. It barely fit, but with a slight click, the lock opened as if recognizing my right to know. The door slowly slid open, and a narrow corridor opened before me, lit only by the flickering light of an old lamp on the ceiling. Every step in this corridor seemed to emerge from the darkness of the past. The walls were covered with old photographs and manuscripts, which seemed to tell the stories of those who had once lived here. I walked past an old clock that kept ticking, reminding me of the inevitable passage of time, and I felt a chill run down my spine. The corridor led to a large wooden door with exquisite carvings that bore strange symbols similar to those I had seen on the box. I carefully opened the door, and a small hall unfolded before me, as if from another era. This room had everything: antique furniture, dusty books on the walls, a large mirrored chest of drawers. A subtle sound echoed from around every corner, as if the past were whispering its secrets. I approached the mirror that occupied the entirety of one wall. In his reflection, I saw myself, not the person I had always thought I was, but confused, full of fear and determination at the same time. But the most striking thing was that behind me in the mirror image a silhouette appeared, similar to the man on the roof, but now he was standing next to me, so close that I felt as if his cold gaze would penetrate my heart. My heart was beating frantically, and my mind was trying to unite all the pieces of this strange puzzle. The room smelled of time and dust, and each object seemed to have its own story. I noticed an old map scattered on the table, marking certain places in the apartment, as well as a few handwritten notes that mentioned a forgotten room and a mysterious force that had been ruling here for centuries. At that moment, a quiet but clear humming sound came from the ceiling, as if the apartment itself was coming to life. The feeling of an invisible presence became more and more intrusive. I went to the table, leaned over the map, and tried to solve its riddles. The notes spoke of an ancient vow that bound the souls of the inhabitants of this house to its secrets. They warned, everyone who seeks the truth must pay the price of knowledge. The sound of footsteps behind me made me turn my head. A silhouette stood in the hallway, indescribably familiar, but in a way that I could not describe. He did not move, as if he had been standing still for eternity, and his eyes glowed with incredible cold determination. I felt every cell in my body fill with fear and at the same time a desire to learn more. All these things, the key, the postcard, the mirror, the map, seemed to be parts of one big puzzle that showed the way to the answer. But the more I approached the truth, the more tangible the warning became. Not every truth brings liberation. An invisible force was slowly enveloping me. I realized that now every step I took was leading me to the solution or to new disasters. At that moment, a voice from the depths of the hall cut through the silence as if an inviting but frightening whisper came from the walls themselves. Time is running out and your soul is choosing its own path. I froze, not knowing whether to stop or continue my journey in this realm of forgotten memories where every secret could reveal a new part of myself. And then, once again, a new, barely audible knock came from behind the wall, forcing me to gather all my courage. I felt every cell in my body pierced with cold and fear as the quiet knocking outside the hall turned into something that seemed alive. My heart was racing as I turned to the source of the sound. The walls, which only yesterday seemed to be silent witnesses of the past, now, as if they had a soul of their own, whispered elusive stories of forgotten fates. I slowly walked to an ancient corner of the hall where the darkness itself seemed to be concentrated. On the cold floor lay an old blanket covered with dust, beneath which were visible traces of recent movement. A small object glistened in the faint light of the lamp like a sign that something important was waiting to be revealed. I bent down and carefully picked it up. It was an old golden coin with strange symbols embossed on it that resembled runes from another era. The surface of the coin was cool and its weight was unexpectedly heavy, as if it had a history of its own, rooted in time. My palms trembled as I turned it carefully in my hands, trying to unravel its meaning. Time seemed to stand still around me. Every sound, every whisper seemed to be in unison with this mysterious artifact. I felt that the coin carried a message that could open the way to the truth, but at the same time a warning about the dangers of knowledge. Suddenly, like a lightning bolt in the darkness, the thought came to me, could this object be the key to unraveling the mystery that surrounded the house? All the artifacts, a diary, a postcard, an old map, a mirror, merged into a single series of clues. Each of them spoke of an ancient vow that connected the inhabitants of this place to its past, as if each soul had left its mark here, despite the years that had passed. I raised the coin even higher, hoping that its shine would help reveal the secret. At that moment, the wall of the hall shuddered as if someone or something had knocked inside, forcing me to stop for a moment. The whispering coming from outside the walls grew, turning into a voice that seemed familiar but so distant and mysterious. It seemed to be saying, the truth is hidden in the details and everything has a price. I felt a cold sweat cover my face. Was this a warning? Was this coin part of a great game where every step could reveal new secrets or reveal a truth that no one could hide from? The unknown force that controlled this place was silently waiting for my next step. I slowly lowered the coin, but did not let go of it. It became a symbol of my determination to find out the truth, even if it would break my soul. It felt as if every new sound, every whisper in this room was bringing me closer to the final clue, a clue that could change everything I knew about this house and, perhaps, about myself. The walls seemed to breathe with me, and a voice in the distance seemed to remind me, you have already plunged into the whirlpool of the past, and now there is no turning back. I closed my eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and when I opened them, I saw another detail glisten on the surface of the coin, a tiny sign that seemed to pulse in time with my heart. It was like a cry that invited me to move on, not knowing what was waiting behind the next door. And then, as if from under the ground, I heard a new, even clearer knocking, as if time itself had given me a sign that the solution was closer than I could have imagined. I stood there, fascinated and frightened, feeling as if every detail of this place spoke of an unknown future. My heart was beating so fast that it seemed ready to break from excitement and fear at the same time. And in that moment I realized that every choice, everything I found, had led me to an inescapable truth that could no longer be postponed. The echo of that final, decisive knock still resonated in my ears as I stepped away from the cold, silent altar of relics. Every heartbeat felt like a countdown to an inevitable revelation. I took a shaky step toward a narrow door at the far end of the hall, a door I hadn't noticed before, its surface covered with intricate carvings that seemed to tell a forgotten myth. The very presence of the door sent a shiver down my spine, as if it guarded secrets that even the relentless passage of time dared not erase. I reached out and hesitated for a moment, fingers trembling as they brushed against the worn brass handle. The door creaked open with a long, sorrowful groan, unveiling a small, dimly lit chamber. Inside, the walls were lined with faded photographs and handwritten letters pinned like breadcrumbs, guiding an inquisitive soul deeper into the mystery of this house. In the center of the room, a solitary wooden desk sat under a narrow beam of moonlight that slipped through a crack in the ceiling. Upon the desk lay a leather-bound journal, its cover scarred by age, and beside it an envelope sealed with wax bearing a symbol that matched the one on the coin. I approached slowly, each step echoing in the cavernous silence. The journal's pages were filled with meticulous handwriting, chronicling events from decades past. The entries spoke of a family that once resided here, whose lives had been intertwined with inexplicable happenings and unspoken rituals. One entry in particular caught my eye. It described an occurrence so similar to what I had been experiencing that it sent a jolt of both dread and curiosity through me. When the mirror reflects more than a mere image, when whispers traverse the gap between life and memory, only then will the truth of our existence be unveiled. I ran my fingers over the faded ink, feeling an inexplicable connection with those who had once suffered and hoped within these walls. The envelope, however, beckoned for my attention more urgently. With a deep breath, I broke the wax seal and unfolded the letter inside. The message was brief yet potent. You have unlocked the path. Beware, for the next step may shatter the veil that protects you from the darkness within. Trust not the whispers, for they speak in tongues of despair. The words sent tremors through my mind. Every element, the journal, the envelope, the door itself, formed an intricate tapestry of fate that was drawing me irrevocably towards a final confrontation with the secrets of this accursed place. I felt as if I were being observed by unseen eyes, not only by the lingering souls of the past but by something far more sinister that lurked in the spaces between memories and time. The chamber grew colder still, and the silence was punctured by the distant sound of a clock ticking in an unseen room, a relentless reminder of time slipping away. My resolve hardened. I knew that to escape the grip of this mystery, I had to confront it head-on. But at the same time, a part of me dreaded the inevitable truth that awaited beyond the threshold of this chamber. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, gathering the remnants of courage that flickered within me like a fragile flame. When I reopened them, I whispered to myself a single, determined word: proceed. The letter's ominous warning echoed in my thoughts, yet the desire to know the truth burned brighter than any fear. With trembling hands, I gathered the journal and the coin, tucking them carefully into my jacket pocket. Then, with one last look at the chamber that held so many forgotten sorrows, I turned back towards the narrow corridor, feeling the weight of unseen forces pressing down on me. Every step forward was a step into an abyss of revelations, an abyss from which there might be no return. When I left that mysterious room, it seemed as if the building itself began to breathe heavier. The air became thicker, as if it was saturated with old secrets that were about to burst out. I clutched the coin and the journal in my hand, realizing that they were the keys to the solution, but also a trap that could drag me deeper than I was willing to go. I stopped in the dark corridor, trying to figure out where to go next. The walls, which had previously been motionless, now seemed alive. They vibrated with a barely perceptible pulse, as if something hidden beneath them was waiting for its time. A shadow that flashed at the edge of my vision made me turn around, but there was nothing or no one. I took a deep breath, trying to control my anxiety. The journal had mentioned a mirror, the same object that had already made me see more than I should have once. If all these things are connected, then I need to go back there. I headed back to the large mirror that took up the entire wall of the old hall. When I stood in front of it again, something was different. The mirror no longer reflected the room as it had before. It no longer reflected me. Instead, it showed a scene: an old study, dusty books on the shelves, a heavy chair by the window. A man was sitting in it. He looked ordinary, except for one detail: his face was blurred, as if time had erased his identity, leaving only his presence. His hands were resting on the armrests, and his eyes, although I couldn't see them clearly, seemed to be directed directly at me. I felt my blood run cold. The man slowly tilted his head to the side, as if studying me, and then his lips began to move. I didn't hear a sound, but the words appeared on the surface of the mirror as if someone was burning them into the glass. You have found what you were looking for. But are you ready to lose what you have? I felt panic rising inside me. What does he mean? What do I have to lose? I took a step back, but the mirror was no longer just a reflection. It had become something more. Its surface began to slowly change, dissolving into darkness. And then I realized. It was not just a portal to the past. It was a window to an opportunity. Or a trap. The darkness inside the mirror pulsed as if it were breathing, urging me to step forward. I felt something invisible pulling me closer, like a magnet. Logic screamed that it was a trap, that I should retreat immediately, but instinct, or perhaps some alien desire, pushed me on. The man in the chair was no longer moving his lips, but his figure was becoming clearer. His hands, which had previously been lying motionless on the armrests, were now tapping lightly. Not rhythmically, not randomly, as if it were a code, a message that I had to decipher. My fingers clutched the magazine in my pocket. Could there be an answer in it? I quickly flipped through a few pages until I came across an entry made in a different hand, less smooth, more nervous, as if written in panic. Don't make the same mistakes he did. If you see him, you are already in too deep. Get out. While you still can. My gaze returned to the mirror. The man was no longer sitting. He was standing. and now his blurry face was very close to the surface of the glass. My breath caught in my throat. I could feel his gaze, though I couldn't see his eyes. He knew that I was reading the tape. He knew I understood. Suddenly the glass cracked. First a small crack, then a second, then a third. It spread like a spider's web, approaching my feet. I took a step back. And then the mirror exploded. Not with shards, no. It was silence. Absolute, suffocating silence that swallowed everything around. All sounds disappeared. I opened my mouth trying to scream, but I couldn't even hear my own voice. The darkness from the mirror burst out, filling the room. It crawled up the walls, slid across the floor, enveloped everything around me. And then I heard his voice, a whisper. Barely audible, but so close. Now you are a part of this. And the world before my eyes disappeared. My body seemed to fall into an endless void. I was not falling, not flying. I just existed in the darkness that had neither beginning nor end. There was nothing around me but the pressing feeling of someone else's presence. The voice sounded again next to me. Now it was clearer, deeper, almost calm. You were looking for the truth. Now it is looking for you. I tried to say something, but my lips did not obey. I could not feel my body. Only my consciousness, hovering between reality and something else, much more alien and unnatural. Suddenly something appeared in front of me. Not a face, not a body, just a pair of eyes watching me from the darkness. They did not reflect light, did not shine, but I knew that they saw me completely. You took what did not belong to you. The voice was no longer a whisper. It was inside me. The coin, I remembered. It was still in my pocket. My hand, which was finally able to move, touched its cold surface. My eyes fluttered in the darkness. Give it back. I squeezed the coin harder. The darkness around me began to change. It was no longer just emptiness. It was moving, pulsating, taking shape. I saw the outlines of rooms, figures wandering the corridors. Everything was mixed up, faces without features, voices without words, silhouettes that moved but never got closer. And in the middle of it all, a mirror. It was the same as the one I was standing in front of. But now it didn't reflect the room. It reflected me. But not the me I knew. I looked different. My eyes were alien. My face was changed. And behind me in the reflection he was standing. I felt his hand on my shoulder. And then I realized. I was no longer myself. Panic washed over me. I tried to move, to break away, to distance myself from this terrible reality, but my body did not obey. The mirror was still standing in front of me, and I saw not just a reflection, I saw someone else. Me, but not myself. My face looked changed. Pale skin, sunken eyes, a thin, barely noticeable smile that didn't belong to me. The reflection tilted its head, watching me closely, as if assessing how far I had come. There was still a shadow behind me. Its contours moved, not having a clear shape. But I knew it could see me. What have you done to me? My voice sounded in the void, but did not echo. The shadow did not answer. But its presence was pressing, forcing my brain to frantically search for a way out, like a rat in a trap. I remembered the coin again. It was in my hand. Cold, heavy, like a part of something alien, something that had never belonged to this world. You were already a part of it, a voice said inside me. And suddenly everything changed. The mirror began to tremble. Its surface was disturbed like water into which a stone was thrown. The reflection no longer repeated my movements, it acted independently. It slowly stretched out its hand towards the glass as if trying to break free. I felt horror grip me. The reflection was looking directly at me, and I realized that it was smiling wider. And the next moment I saw its lips saying the words without sound, "Now I am you." Suddenly someone's hand squeezed my neck. I inhaled sharply as if emerging from the water. Everything spun, space was torn apart, the mirror shattered into hundreds of pieces. And I woke up. I opened my eyes. My heart was pounding so hard that it seemed like it was about to burst out of my chest. My breathing was ragged, my lips were dry, and my mind was in chaos. I was in the same room. But something was different. The mirror. It was gone. I quickly got to my feet, trying to get my bearings. The walls looked just as old, the furniture was still there, the air was filled with the musty smell of dust and moisture. But the feeling was different, as if everything around me was watching me. I instinctively reached into my pocket, checking for the coin. It was still there, but now its surface seemed hot, almost pulsating. Something had changed. I looked at my hands. And froze. My hands. They were not my hands. The skin was a little darker, the fingers longer, the veins stood out sharper. I ran to the old cracked mirror on the wall, my only chance to see myself. And when I looked into the reflection, I felt everything inside me shrink. The face looking back at me was not mine. It was him. The man in the mirror. I opened my mouth, but instead of my voice, someone else's laughter came out. Deep, low, unfamiliar. And then I realized I'm not me anymore. Cold horror pierced me to the bone. I touched my face, feeling every curve, but it was someone else's face. My movements did not feel natural. My own hands felt foreign. I stepped back, barely holding back a scream. My heart was pounding so hard that it seemed to echo in the building itself. This is impossible," I whispered. Suddenly the door to the room slammed. I turned around jerkily. There was someone outside the door. I didn't know what to do. Two feelings were fighting inside me: panic, fear, and a strange calmness that did not belong to me. Some new, unfamiliar feeling of power. The echo of footsteps was getting closer. And then I heard a voice. "Jacob? Is that you?" I froze. "Jacob? Who is Jacob?" My head throbbed with pain. I tried to remember my name, my history, my life. But something was wrong. Memories blurred together like blurry spots of paint on water. The door slowly opened. A woman was standing on the doorstep. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. In her eyes I could see fear, distrust, and something else. "Jacob. Oh my God, is it really you?" she whispered. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know who I was. But the worst part was that deep down, I began to feel that I wouldn't like the answers. I opened my eyes. My heart was pounding so hard that it seemed like it was about to burst out of my chest. My breathing was ragged, my lips were dry, and my mind was in chaos. I was in the same room. But something was different. The mirror. It was gone. I quickly got to my feet, trying to get my bearings. The walls looked just as old, the furniture was still there, the air was filled with the musty smell of dust and moisture. But the feeling was different, as if everything around me was watching me. I instinctively reached into my pocket, checking for the coin. It was still there, but now its surface seemed hot, almost pulsating. Something had changed. I looked at my hands. And froze. My hands. They were not my hands. The skin was a little darker, the fingers longer, the veins stood out sharper. I ran to the old cracked mirror on the wall, my only chance to see myself. And when I looked into the reflection, I felt everything inside me shrink. The face looking back at me was not mine. It was him. The man in the mirror. I opened my mouth, but instead of my voice, it was someone else's laughter. Deep, low, unfamiliar. And then I realized. I'm not me anymore. Cold horror pierced me to the bone. I touched my face, feeling every curve, but it was someone else's face. My movements did not feel natural. My own hands felt foreign. I stepped back, barely holding back a scream. My heart was pounding so hard that it seemed to echo in the building itself. This is impossible," I whispered. But the voice was also someone else's. Suddenly the door to the room slammed. I turned around jerkily. There was someone outside the door. I didn't know what to do. Two feelings were fighting inside me: panic, fear, and a strange calmness that didn't belong to me. Some new, unfamiliar feeling of strength. The echo of footsteps was getting closer. And then I heard a voice. "Jacob? Is that you?" I froze. "Jacob? Who is Jacob?" My head throbbed with pain. I tried to remember my name, my history, my life. But something was wrong. My memories blurred like blurry spots of paint on water. The door slowly opened and a woman stood in the doorway. She looked familiar, but I couldn't remember where from. In her eyes I could see fear, distrust, and something else. "Jacob. Oh my God, is it really you?" she whispered. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know who I was. But the worst part was that deep down I began to feel that I wouldn't like the answers. The woman stood in the doorway, her eyes fixed on me. Her lips trembled, her eyes filled with tears. I thought you were dead." Her words pierced me like a cold knife. "Dead? Who died? Me?" I took a step forward, not knowing what I was doing. The woman inhaled sharply, as if she were struggling between joy and terror. "Jacob. Is it really you?" Something inside me twitched. It was the name. It sounded like it belonged to me, and yet it didn't. I tried to remember who I was, but the harder I tried, the more my memories blurred. I saw fragments of my life: hands holding the same coin, dark corridors, mirrors. Mirrors that never showed the truth. I wanted to say something, but at that moment my lips stretched into a smile. The woman took a step back. No. It's not you." I suddenly realized that I no longer felt fear. The panic was gone. Instead, I felt a strange warmth. I looked at my hands. They no longer seemed alien. Somewhere deep inside I heard a voice. "You did not take his place. You came home." I looked in the mirror. And there I saw the real me. The man everyone thought was dead. The man who had been replaced. And now I knew. I had not only become part of history. I had become who I was meant to be all along.